Welcome to the November edition of the u3a podcast. Believe it or not, our 45th edition. As always, we have fascinating stories and insights from the vibrant u3a community. I'm Peter Clift, and we've got a packed programme for you, filled with creativity, expertise, and a few surprises along the way. We'll dive into the world of ventriloquism, learning the tricks of the trade from a u3a member who brings puppets to life with wit and skill, but whose first dummy was born out of evolution.
The first character I had was the cheeky boy, and my dad was reading about Darwin's theory, the evolution of the Homo sapien and all of that, and he said, you need an animal. And so we decided to get this chimpanzee. It's still my favourite.
We'll also hear from an author from Portmaddock who's published several books.
Look, Denise, you've got the basis of an autobiography here. All you need to do is fill in the gaps. And she wrote a total of 222,000 words. That's a lot for a book.
And we explore the life of a landscape photographer who captures the beauty of the world around us through his camera lens.
The landscape that the viewer, the photographer, is absolutely in complete awe of, that image must contain the stimulus to be able to produce that sense of awe in the viewer. If the viewer says, yeah, it's really pretty, and walks away, you didn't do it.
It's going to be an interesting programme of stories, knowledge, and of course, the unique spirit of u3a. So let's get started. Now here's something you may not know. We are in the middle of a butterfly emergency. Yes, that's right. Butterfly populations are facing serious challenges, and it's an issue that impacts all of us. Someone who can shed some light on this urgent matter is Roger Newman, a knowledgeable u3a member from Witney who knows all about the state of these beautiful creatures and what we can do to help. I caught up with Roger recently and began by asking him what exactly is the butterfly emergency.
The way I see it, it's a recognition that despite short-term fluctuations in the butterfly populations, there has been now demonstrated scientifically based evidence of long-term butterfly decline. As a consequence, it's a sort of wake-up call to say we really have to address the issues that are causing this and see if we can resolve or at least mitigate some of the factors that are behind this, because butterflies are so important for our biodiversity.
So does it really matter in the great scheme of things if their numbers are declining?
I think it does, because of the fact that they are indicators of everything else declining. And if we start losing insect populations, we are going to seriously start suffering in terms of productivity of food supplies and other important aspects of, healthy water supplies, soil qualities, that sort of thing, because the whole insect community is so valuable and important in keeping a balance in our ecosystems.
80% of butterflies and moths have declined apparently since 1976. What's caused that, do you think?
There's a range of things that have actually led to that. And if we sort of pick just on a few of them, there's quite a lot associated with habitat. So there's been habitat degradation, fragmentation, loss of habitat. There's been changes in the way land has been managed. There's been increased use of pesticides. And there's the impacts of climate change. So just to expand on a couple of those, if we start thinking about loss of habitat, hedgerows have disappeared. Hedgerows have been trimmed rather more than they used to be. The young growth in hedgerows can be very important for both egg laying and for the caterpillars. So taking out a lot of hedgerows or cutting them thoroughly every year is an issue. The other thing is that the nature of woodlands. To get a good butterfly population, you'd be having a mixed broad-leaved woodlands rather than plantations of conifers. You'd have open glades, which are important for certain aspects of butterfly development. A lot of those things are just not happening anymore. There's not so much coppicing done in woodland anymore. Any one of those things may not be a factor, but it combined, this variety of habitats, structures, plant diversity is really important to sustain the butterfly populations. If we look at what is really a current very hot potato, is the ban on neonicotinoids, the pesticides that are being used at the moment. I mean, in Europe, they've been banned in many places, and in this country, there was a ban, but now it's been reinstated. And of course, for the farming community, they're really keen to ensure that these pesticides can be continued to be used for productivity. Then these neonics get into the plant system, they get into the waterways, and once they get into the plants, bees, butterflies, lots of insects will be feeding on the plants and therefore take in the neonics, and it leads to either death or paralysis and their demise. I wouldn't say it's the overriding factor, but another consideration, of course, is the factor of climate change. As the world gets warmer, there are certain butterflies, for example, that don't like hot, warm, sunny climates. They're happier with cooler, damper environments. So if you look at something like the mountain ringlet, as it gets warmer, they're moving further and further north. They can only go so far up the mountains, and then it's not cool enough. It's not the right habitat for them to survive. So what we're slowly seeing is a movement of certain butterflies further north as temperatures rise. And we're seeing more butterflies coming from the continent into the south. So we're going to start seeing a change in the range of butterflies in this country. So there is this change of, we're going to lose some further north. We're going to get some more coming in from the south. But the ability of butterflies to adapt to those changes will depend on their availability of habitat. It's all very well saying they can move to a slightly cooler area or a slightly damper area or whatever. But if the food plant isn't there, then they might have the right environment, but they're not going to have the right sort of habitat for themselves.
So is this the decline, is that a new phenomenon, or has it been happening over a large number of years?
Well, in the short term, we've had some very bad results, and we've had some reasonable results. But data's been amassed over a long period of time. The big butterfly count, for example, has been running for 14 years, and the results this year are easily the worst for that whole 14-year period. If we look at longer-term declines, which go back even further to the 70s, although there have been ups and downs, the overall picture is one of steady decline. And we're actually seeing quite a large number of our butterflies threatened with near extinction or extinction in the not-so-distant future as a result.
You mentioned earlier about the loss of habitat, the use of pesticides. Then we come up against the old problem, don't we, that people need feeding, got a growing population, and many will say, well, the only way we can do that is by the use of pesticides and loss of habitat.
I think it's a question of balance. There are a lot of farmers who are adopting, should we say, environmentally friendly approaches to what they're doing. They are being cautious about how much pesticide they use. They are thinking about what crops they should be growing. They are putting in conservation edges to their fields. And, we've seen on the television, there are several examples of where farmers have really made a tremendous effort to do that.
We're not all farmers. I mean, what can we do, the average person in their back garden, to help?
There are quite a few things. I mean, there are certainly opportunities for planting caterpillar-friendly or butterfly-friendly plants. Just leaving corners of the garden with a few nettles, allowing some of the weeds to grow. We all know about buddleias and butterfly bushes and that sort of thing. Again, things like nettles are really important, and various types of grasses are really important. But again, it's the structure as well, which can be particularly valuable.
I guess the message is not to be too clean and tidy in the garden.
It is really, not just for the butterflies, but I think it helps a lot of insects.
Aside from gardening, what else can people do? I mean, I'm thinking particularly of our u3a members.
Coming back to what we chatted about at the beginning, which was monitoring things, surveying. For the big butterfly count this year, which takes place in July and August, there were something like 85,000 people that took part in this, what is essentially a citizen science project. We've got 400,000 members in the u3a or more. Not everyone's got a garden, but a lot of them will have gardens. It's fairly non-demanding to take part in this particular survey. All it takes is 15 minutes to record the number of species you've seen during that period. Just imagine if we could persuade even 20% of that 400,000 to get out in July and August. I think what I'd like to be able to do is just remind our u3a members nearer the time, hey, come July, why not just sit in your garden for 15 minutes?
I was talking there to Roger Newman about the very worrying state of our wildlife. And if you would like more information about butterfly conservation, the National Survey, or what you can do to help in your local area, then contact butterfly-conservation.org. That's butterfly-conservation.org. And there you'll find lots of information, and there'll be plenty of reminders about the next butterfly survey coming up next year. Staying outdoors, we turn to landscape photography. Charlie Waite is a world-renowned landscape photographer, and he takes amateur photographers out on instructional tours. But his background wasn't in photography, and Maggie D met Charlie and asked him where his early career in theatre and television began.
I went into the Salisbury Playhouse. That's where it really all began. And I found myself noticing lighting in the landscape. So the multiple lighting directors I came across played a big role in my understanding of the outside world and how to, if you like, produce a landscape photograph that's going to come to life as a consequence of the lighting. So lighting naturally and understandably plays a massive role in landscape photography. Huge.
So roughly what age were you when you decided, okay, that's where I want to turn my attention?
Probably 20, 28, 29, something like that. Anyway, I've just found that basically it was the whole business of using light that appealed to me immensely. And then I got the most marvellous opportunities. I met somebody in a car who vaguely knew me, and he said the biggest line that changed my life, "What do you do?" And I decided to say, well, I'm a landscape photographer, which was a complete lie. A complete lie.
But then again, you were an actor, so you were good at them.
Yes, I was, okay, yeah, a little porky. And he said, oh, that's wonderful. I'm looking for a photographer to do a book called the National Trust Book of Long Walks with an amazing person and a great, great writer, world famous really, called Adam Nicholson. And Adam and I went off and did a couple of books, 3 books together. That was a great opportunity. And then I became absolutely smitten by connecting with the natural world. And I'm now obsessed with nature. And I always was, but I'm completely obsessed with it. And the camera is the most wonderful conduit with which you can make a very profound engagement with the landscape, because you notice absolutely everything. Whereas if you don't have a camera, you can look at something lovely and just say, oh, isn't that beautiful? And you can't own it, you can't seize it, you can just savour it for a bit, and then you start saying to yourself, what are we going to get for lunch tonight? Whereas the landscape photographer can't go, can't leave, everything has to be put aside, and the heart and the soul and the mind are absolutely focused on that landscape until it's achieved.
Is there something particular that takes place in your mind prior to the decision to make the photograph?
Yes. It's recognising that the landscape in front of you, as the great Ansel Adams said, was able to convert geographic reality to transcendent emotional experience. The landscape that the viewer, the photographer, is absolutely in complete awe of, that image must contain the stimulus to be able to produce that sense of awe in the viewer. If the viewer says, yeah, it's really pretty, and walks away, you didn't do it. And Ansel Adams, the American landscape photographer, said 12 a year and you're doing well. I mean, photography photograph is not a shot, it's not a snap, it's a production, and it can be really, really complex, and that's landscape outside. So there's an enormous amount to incorporate, and one of them is the criteria to judge that landscape in the viewer has to be emotional. There is no other criteria. You can say it's pretty, but you actually have to be massively moved by it in the way that the photographer has to be. Do
you ever bring humour into the landscape?
Once or twice. Yes, once or twice I do, but that's all more chance, really.
Oh, right.
And I can't be sure that the humour that I'm conveying within the photograph will activate the humorous, if you like, receptors in the viewer, whereas beauty kind of does do it. I mean, when we all go for a walk into the countryside or we go down to the sea, we don't always go there to swim. Beauty does it. One of my favourite images of all time, probably my favourite, is the one of the Earth, the planet Earth from the moon, because that's all we've got. That's all we have. We have that sacred, incredible thing called the world, our planet. I certainly believe that every one of us ought to have that photograph of the planet Earth made from the moon by the astronauts. We need to have a fairly big print of it in every household up on our wall and meditate on it and contemplate on it every day of our lives. And I think that will move us to being more sensitive. As our king, our new king said, better be part of nature than apart from it.
Charlie, you actually invented a competition, didn't you?
I did. It's nearly 17 years ago. I decided it would be a wonderful thing for the United Kingdom to collect a mass of images made by very, very talented people, not professional, of the landscape of the United Kingdom. So I decided to call it Landscape Photographer of the Year. And various organisations came behind it, and it started 16 years ago, and we're in January hoping to do the 17th year. And it's especially good for younger people. And very interestingly, more women are photographing than ever before, which is a wonderful thing, really wonderful. And women are beginning to win certain categories. And there's £10,000 if you're the winner. And it tours the whole of the UK over a period of sometimes 6 months. And so landscape photography is it. And that camera engages you so profoundly with the natural world. And then to share it with people living both in the UK and outside it, it introduces, basically it promotes the beautiful landscape that we have throughout the UK, and people can go and see the exhibitions, and it's lovely. And I do various programs on it, and it's really, really, really exciting.
Yeah, that was on TV, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I do quite a lot of the telly, and I'm massively in favour of everybody being landscape photographers. I really am. I just think our world is just full of absolutely amazing things, and it's very easy to not focus on them and contemplate them. It's just incredible what we have.
Well, you probably have one of these very big professional, or several of these professional cameras with lenses and goodness knows what else, but the common or garden mobile phone actually these days has quite a good opportunity with photography, doesn't it?
It does. It really does, especially in recent days. The only thing about it that's not that easy, although with special image manipulating software it is possible up to a point, is making really big prints. 6 or 7 foot, big panoramics. But you don't need to have a super expensive camera. You really don't. The first thing you need is an eye. It's where you see and you conquer very quickly. I've got a lovely phrase that in landscape is, it's a simple line that everyone could listen to, hopefully remember it, which is attend and intend. Attend to everything and let everything attended to be either intended or accepted to be there. Pause. But never, ever unintended. There's nothing worse than somebody saying, I love the way you've got that relationship between that cloud and the land underneath. And you have to quietly say to yourself, I never noticed that.
And with that, thank you so much, Charlie. It's been brilliant chatting with you, really. And I'm hoping to see and hear more of you in the future.
Super. Well, thank you for, as they say, having me on.
Maggie D there, talking to the landscape photographer Charlie Waite. And if you would like to see some of Charlie's work, then go to charliewaite.com. That's charliewaite, all one word, .com. Now, how many of us discover hidden talents when we were still at school? For Ken Wood of Kidderminster, u3a, he was just 12 when he realised he was a dab hand at ventriloquism. Ken spent 40 years performing around the world with many notable stars, and as he nears retirement, he's written about his experiences, and he's been explaining to Joanne Watson how it all began.
I was in a class and we were making puppets. Then one day I was watching television and there was a program called Hank Rides Again with Francis Cowdrell. He sang a song, Hank Rides Again, but he moved his lips. So I tried it in front of the mirror and I said to my dad, I can do that better than he can. So he bought a small puppet of Hank and then they did a school concert with our Punch and Judy. And then the teacher suggested that I should finish doing the Hank Rides Again. And it was very successful.
When did you think that you could actually make a career out of being a ventriloquist?
I went for lessons for about a year, and he gave me my first ventriloquist dummy, which was a sailor, and a few jokes to do. And I was taken to a church hall. At that age, you wore short trousers, and the dummy was bigger than I was, so it was easy to get away with it. I started to do more and more, and I did an opportunity knocks with Hughie Green. Being a speciality, I've worked a lot of shows on television, Tom O'Connor, London Night Out, Dick Emery, but I suppose the best time was Butlins. I was able to be a Butlin redcoat. I spent about 3 years at Butlins. There was Skegness, Filey, and in between I did the hotels. Blackpool 1 year. That's when I first met Freddie Parrotface Davis. He was a well-known comedian. He was there, and Johnny Ball. I eventually decided to leave Butlins and went for an audition for the American bases all over Germany, up and down the autobahns. You do a show, an officer's show, NCO, all sorts of shows. I remember one night I did 5 shows, and that was New Year's Eve. And of course, it was a wonderful experience. I went to with the White Heather Club. I toured Scotland with Robin Hall and Jimmy McGregor. And then I went on to do the Black and White Minstrel Show. That was the tour of Australia and New Zealand, 1969-70.
Now, I know you had some dummies. There was Claude the horse and Jim the chimp. So how did you decide on those characters?
The first character I had was the cheeky boy. And my dad was reading about Darwin's theory, the evolution of the Homo sapien and all of that. And he said, you need an animal. Terry Hall had got Lenny the lion. And so we decided to get this chimpanzee. And the man that made it was a genius. He made a wonderful character, and it's still my favourite.
You obviously have a natural talent to be a ventriloquist, but what are the essential attributes?
Basically, you need a good technique. To put it in a nutshell, I had very ugly teeth at the side, and I could lock my lips together, and talk without moving my lips. Now, some people say, don't bother about that. Make them laugh. So you do need a good comedy character. Years ago, I was booked to do a hotel in Chester, and this young boy came and he said, I'd like to see your act. And his mother invited me home for a cup of tea, and he chatted, and he showed me these little puppets, and this little boy was Keith Harris.
Oh, and Orville, presumably. Did he have Orville at that time?
Yeah, he became quite a big star, but I've considered myself a good speciality act.
I know that you suffered with increasingly poor hearing and stage fright. Now, that must have made life very difficult for you.
I used to do a joke. I went to the doctor, so I said, I can't hear the audience laugh. The doctor said, don't worry, I've seen your act, and they don't. And of course, the stage fright, when it happened, I was doing these huge shows. I was on with the Bachelors at Scarborough twice nightly. It's like having a panic attack in front of 2,000 people. Funnily enough, in that show was Mikey Allwood, who was a brilliant impressionist. And he was suffering with just the same. But probably my biggest achievement in life is dealing with it. You can't fight against it. It causes more tension. You've got to accept it. And it was so difficult. It took about 2 years, but it was wonderful, to be able to conquer that.
Maybe, Ken, to finish with, you can maybe give us something in the voice of your chimp character.
I got this joke. It's a terrible, corny joke. So I say, what's your name? Jim. Yeah. Why do they call you Jim? Well, they call me Jim because I look like a flower. Flower? Yeah. What sort of a flower? A pansy. A pansy? Yeah. A chimpanzee.
Joanne Watson talking to Ken Wood, the ventriloquist. And Ken Wood's book is called Talking to Myself, and I'm quite proud of myself for avoiding the inevitable got leg ear jokes. Next we visit Porthmadog, u3a, but that leads us on an adventure that involves the 1953 Everest exhibition, sailing a yacht in the Arctic and around South America, and a lady who was the daughter of famous climbers. The lady concerned was Denise Evans, and it was Cathy Woodhead of Porthmadog u3a who encouraged her to write her autobiography. Bob Wells invited Cathy into the studio to find out more.
Today I'm joined by Cathy Woodhead. Cathy, a former teacher, has published 14 books and is member of the Porthmadog u3a. She has just published Reaching Beyond the Mountains and Voyages of Denise Evans, which is an autobiography of Denise, which was written by the late Denise Evans. Hello, Cathy, and welcome to the u3a podcast.
Hello.
So before we talk about the book, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and what led up to your interest in writing and publishing?
Yes. Well, first, it's all started in 2008 about when I had my mother used to write articles about our family holidays when we were young. And I had her scrapbook. She had these published actually in the Christian Science Monitor. And she had these cut up in a scrapbook, which I had. Now, I have 4 brothers and a sister, and I thought, how can I share these with them? So I started typing up the articles, and, well, there were more and more, and I sort of thought they should go into a book. I couldn't think that a publisher would be interested, so I just completely worked out how to do it myself. And that started me off. And then I have been doing quite a few local history books.
But the book itself that you've recently published about Denise Evans, how did you get involved with it?
Well, I first met Denise in the late 1980s. And she was a member of the Pinnacle Club. This is a rock club for women rock climbers. And so that's how I got to know her. She had climbed a lot and sailed a lot, and she used to write articles for the Pinnacle Club Journal, the Alpine Club Journal. She's been the only woman president of the Alpine Club, and she used to write articles for the Ocean Cruising Club. And so I sort of collected these up and scanned and digitized them and gave her a Word file. And I said, look, Denise, you've got the basis of an autobiography here. All you need to do is fill in the gaps. And she went away. This was actually only in the last 3 or 4 years. And she wrote a total of 222,000 words. That's a lot for a book.
Yes.
So I had copies printed for her family and for her to give to family and friends. And then she died last November at the age of 92. So she was 91 when we had these books printed. So, but it was too long, and we thought that we could do a better job of it. So we basically crowdfunded, and the Pinnacle Club gave us a nice lump sum, which enabled us to get a professional editor who has cut it down by over half. But we've added lots of photographs, and we've had maps done, and it's been designed by a professional designer. And it's a really, really lovely book now. And it was the publication date was 1st of November 2024. So that's what we did.
Without any spoilers, could you just tell us a little bit about Denise's story?
Yeah, well, Denise was born in France in 1931, and her father was Jean Moran, and her mother was English, Nia Moran, she married Jean. She had written a famous book called A Woman's Reach, which was all about her as a climber. It's a very important classic book. Now, Denise grew up. During the war, she came to Wales as a young girl, went to school in Wales. She eventually married to Charles Evans. He was the deputy leader of the Everest expedition in 1953. And they lived in Wales. She had 3 sons, and they would climb together. And she went on various Himalayan expeditions. But Charles became ill with multiple sclerosis and was eventually wheelchair bound. And they took up sailing. And Denise basically really must have got the bug for it, because she bought a 33-foot yacht, and she sailed it to Greenland twice. She sailed around Iceland, up to Svalbard. And with her son, she sailed around South America. And she was sailing right up until her mid-80s. So she did an extraordinary amount. Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing that you learnt about her?
I learnt about her resilience. I've just got a little passage here. So she's on an expedition with the Pinnacle Club to Nepal in 1962. Right. So she's been up at quite a high altitude, but she says, "My legs felt strange, and I was relieved when we were able to wrap empty polythene bags around ourselves and glissade down the last few hundred feet. When I took my temperature, I found the thermometer persistently read 105 degrees, even after vigorous shaking. I realized it was time to settle down in bed with Nancy's copy of Dr. Zhivago."
Wow.
So they're in the back of beyond, and I can see her doing that. Oh, look, I think I have a little. I think I better go and have a lie down. 105 degrees. You know, she was amazing. And then another time, they were trying to get into the Magellan Strait of Magellan, and the wind was blowing the boat backwards, and then they had horrendous engine trouble on their trip around South America, and they even had to commandeer the help of the Chilean Navy. So there's all sorts of things. She was also a painter. She did beautiful watercolors, so we've included some of those in the book. And she wrote about after the 1953 expedition to Everest. She went with her husband on a tour of Russia. A lot of details on her tour of Russia. He was giving talks about his expeditions. Yeah.
Sounds like there's loads of interesting stories in there for people to read. Where can people get a copy of the book, Kathy?
They can get it from my website, which is it's Delverin Publications. That's DELFRYN Publications. You'll find it on there. And also Corday Books, CORDEE. Corday Books are also distributor of it. There's going to be a book launch at Placid Brennan in Capel on the 6th of December at 7:30. That's what it's about.
Well, Kathy, it's been a really fascinating conversation. And I'm sure that our U3A members will enjoy hearing about the life of Denise Evans. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Bob Wells there chatting to Kathy Woodhead. And Bob Wells' interview with Kathy Woodhead brings us to the close of this November edition of the U3A podcast. It's been wonderful diving into the unique world of our U3A members. From enlightening insights on the butterfly emergency to the fascinating journey into ventriloquism, we've covered quite a range. We also got a glimpse into the life of an accomplished author and discovered the art of capturing landscape with a camera. A big thank you to you for being part of the journey with us. All that remains is for me, Peter Clift, to thank all our guests for sharing their expertise and experiences, and to thank our reporters Bob Wells, Maggie D and Joanne Watson. Studio production was by Lee Wellbrook, and the editor was yours truly. We hope today's stories inspire you to explore your own interests and maybe even try something new. So until next time, take care, keep learning and keep sharing those incredible talents.